Yo! So this is a plus 23 lower Karazhan on Fortified, Bursting, Storming, Shrouded week. So, we're going to start off this dungeon by shrouding past this first ad, literally just the first one. If you don't have Shroud in your group, if you've got, you can just pull that ad, or you can have people in Vispot next to it. It takes too long, and it's not really worth killing. So I'm going to pull all three of these groups together, including that Pat. And the key here is just to make sure that with the Ghostly Philanthropist that you get them marked and just be ready to CC their Pennies from Heaven cast. So they do it about every 12 to 14 seconds, and in this first group there's 4 of them. So I always start off and just wait till I can see like 1 or 2 of them casting at the same time, and then I'll hit it with the Lake Sweep. And then generally, the next one will all happen again at the same time if you pull them close enough together, and you can hit the next one with a ring apiece. After that, there's generally only 1 or 2 left. If that's the case, when the next ones come up, I generally try to hit them with Paralyze. I might touch a Death them so they'll die. Or you can Chi Torpedo / roll out and then clash back onto them, and that'll get them to stop too. So lots of options for getting those to stop, but they are a hard cast, which means they're not interruptible through normal means. So from there on out, I grab the next pack, and I just come on down the stairs, grab this pack over here, and then I'll combine it with the one that's over after this. So, with this going on, you're going to have the Shrouded guy, and we're going to have 3 Philanthropists, so that means 3 throw pennies, or Pennies from Heaven. Now, the thing to be careful with this is that they're going off at different times, because I pulled them separately, and we already used like Ring of Peace and Leg Sweep, so just be ready to hit them with your Paralyze, Clash, have other people that are in your group ready to take care of those Pennies from Heaven casts so that they don't go off. Now, they are avoidable. I generally just, if we don't have an interrupt for it, I just tell people to move away from them. It shows little pennies on the ground with like an orange circle, but it definitely does damage even if you're not standing in the circle. So I would just stay away from the circles, because even if you're not in them, you seem to take damage from them. Once that group's done, you can go ahead and pull the next pack, and the pack after that, that does have this guy. Now, I outranged my healer, and I wasn't thinking, and, well, that happened. Luckily, my Warlock had a Soulstone on me, so I was able to pop back up. But just be ready to use, like, Fort Brew there, so that you don't get killed in case you outrange your healer. But again, there are more Pennies from Heaven people in here, the Ghostly Philanthropists, so I'm just going to, again, make sure I get those marked, and, just kind of continue to take care of these. Making sure to move out of sleep puddles and try to avoid them while dealing with the Pennies from Heaven. You can see that on both of those nameplates there, you can see that little counter on the right. That's a weak roar that I have that actually shows you the cooldown of the cast for those. So, like, it's a great weak roar to have. I'll link it in this video. It does it not just for that mob, but you can see it over the Infiltrator there. It's showing me the cooldowns of both of their abilities, both the frontal and the Leech and Claws. So that's a really good one to have. And of course, oh no, went too quickly and unfortunately slept myself. Now, normally while you're pulling that pack, it's actually, once all the small dudes are dead, it's normally safe for the healer to go and run activate this. The rogue said that he did, but apparently he didn't click on the guy, or just thought he needed to walk down. I'm not really sure. But anyways, ideally you get that activated beforehand, because otherwise you're going to end up with, like I have here, where we're just sitting and repeating. Was a great chance for me to eat up again, though, since I had died. But with this one, this week, it's specifically the West Side story. So we've got the monk and then the Murloc with all the bubbles and the waves coming in. So generally, this first pack actually hurts the most, because the ads will poison people on your team, and then they'll also jump around and put fire everywhere. So I generally tell people to lust on this first pack so that we can take care of that, and then I just make sure to watch for the poisons going on the members of my group so that I can help detox those off. Tony's actually not super important here. I mean, like I said, he does do the jump where he puts the fire, and he does that big AoE circle that'll stun you if you get stuck in it. But generally, you want to try to kill the ads here. Same thing with the next portion of this boss event, you definitely want to kill the ads first. Here you can see I'm making sure to use my detox when I can. It's also useful to stun these mobs, although it's going to be more worth having the stun for the next set of ads that are coming. Generally, if the poison goes on you, you don't need to dispel yourself. I generally try to dispel someone who I know is a little bit more squishy, generally my healer. Rogue's not terrible of pick for this comp that I have here. The monk should have dispelled himself, but I dispelled him earlier. And once those ads are taken care of, you can see we can just pretty much just avoid fire, right? As soon as these ads are dead, what I always do is I come over and I mark. You can actually see I already did. I marked the 3 murlocs. And basically, beforehand, you generally want to try to assign those. I generally put me in the rogue. I'll take purple, rogue will take star, and then I'll assign the 2 other people to triangle. Because basically, as a monk, we can interrupt diamond first here, and then use paralyze on the second time. And the rogue can do the same thing with their interrupt and then blind. And if everyone's waiting until the end to kick, then the third one, you can get all 3 of them with leg sweep. And then the 4th one, you can get all 3 of them with Ring of Peace. It's amazing when it works out that way. Unfortunately, our rogue decided to instantly kick, so we don't have them all going off. If any of those casts do go off, just be careful. The bubbles they throw, if you go into them, they will carry you straight out in whatever direction they're going, and a lot of times it'll put you into a wave or just end up with you dead, because you can't really move after that. So, again, the priority here are the ads of the fight. Again, getting those kicks off and taking care of those things. Unfortunately, our monk did die a little bit earlier, and because I died on that cast before, or the pack before, we used our B-res, so we don't have it. So, unfortunately, that's going to cost us a little bit of time here, but you can see as long as we're taking care of these ads, the fight's actually not that difficult. So, after the ads are dead, you're going to be stuck with the Murloc, and then Tony will pop back in once she hits 50%. From there, I personally think Tony is a little bit more annoying because it puts fire all over the place. However, this chick right here obviously is putting the waves back and forth. It's putting the thunder debuff on everything. So most of the time it's going to be safer to kill the Murloc first, just to get rid of that extra unavoidable damage, since all this is unavoidable, and Tony's technically is completely avoidable. You can see with the waves that I'm specifically trying to stay in like one spot, let one go past me, and then I move in behind it. Generally the same method that I take with the horses on the final boss in this dungeon, or like Anduin if you ever did that fight. It is a little bit more complicated to do when there's also storming going on. As you can see, I got knocked up, but again, just avoid the orange circle. It will stun you if you get hit by that. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to kill you. But you are stunned for like 3 seconds, so just make sure that you avoid those orange circles and try not to place the bosses where there's fire on the ground. Now, one thing to know, if you do lose someone during this fight and you don't have a B-res to get them back up, after you finish it, you actually have to leave the room in order to B-res them. Something with how these ads work and the fact that they don't actually die keeps you in combat. So you can see I had to come all the way over to the wall and then I'll res them. But I'm going to do one more pool. So I tell my group to stay back here. I place my Transcendence right next to this door, and I tell them we're going to do one more pull before we either teleport out or die and go back to the entrance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to grab all the small ads that are on the ground level floor. Unfortunately, the Pat was too close to the Zug mini-boss. I don't want him, so I'm just going to leave him there. If he had been anywhere else, I would have pulled him, but we don't want the Zug mini-boss. So I'm just going to pull him out here, and the key here is just to slowly kite this in a circle, okay? Try not to stun or root the ads in the bright lights because it gives a damage buff. It does give that damage buff to your teammates if they stand in there as well. But that's why it's important not to like root them in there. And then I'm just cycling through all my defensives and just kind of slowly kiting in a circle. Every time they put down the light, I'm generally going to move. Now, you don't want to go too close to the back wall. This is as close to the back wall as I would get, because Warlocks and a couple other classes, their AoE will go through the wall and pull the mini-boss. And we don't want the mini-boss to be pulled here, and it's a bad mob to use to try to reset and go back to the beginning of the dungeon, because sometimes if it starts the shield, it'll still, like, as people res, it'll apply the shield to the people even though they're that far away. So just be careful after this. So I did let my team know that we were going to be dying after this. Bursting Week's a great week for this because as everything dies, you can kind of just let your team die. My healer let me die there. I purposely stood in the fire because I wanted to come back here. And we're going to go the other way towards Maiden. So if you have your portal up and you have a portal, you can just teleport out and teleport back. It's about the same amount of time. If you die and then you got to wait for other people to die, it's a good time to eat food. So you can see we're just going through this back way. The other monk had released, and he is going to start eating. I'm going to eat, and then we're going to pull some of these mobs on the railing up at the top. Now, I choose to go to Maiden first. This is because if you go to Maiden and you end up needing a little bit more trash, when you end at the Huntsman boss, or Attumen, whatever you want to call it, there are really easy mobs to kill right above him. So if you slightly need a little bit more trash, it's a good spot to pick up. So I'm going to pull all these things along the edge. Now, I don't want the Warlock to start casting up here because there's a weird bug with the floor. So I jump off the side, and I just pull a couple other mobs in and let the ones that I pulled up top come down, and we're just going to take over from here. There's nothing deadly in this pack at all. If you pull one more, there is a Shrouded guy, but I don't recommend pulling him just yet because he can pull other groups. But you can see I'm just dealing with this down here. This is to avoid the Warlock pulling anything through the floor because there's some weird stuff with the floor there. I'm going to pull in both these servants. They do some casts. They're not terribly important. Do know that the servants are the only ones that cause bursting since it is bursting week. The other phantom guests don't. And they've nerfed the phantom guests to where they no longer throw dynamite and randomly cast heal and everything. Now they're all just the same. They just don't do anything, which is really nice because the dynamite throws really hurt before. So, you can see once the initial guest died, I pulled in a couple more. I am going to let these servants die before I pull anything more, though. Now, you can see I'm getting the next group marked. The guy that I marked is the most important. He does two different casts. One of them is a volley. It says, like, Shadow Bolt Volley. However, it doesn't just do damage, it fears everyone that gets hit by it. So the Spectral Retainer, this is your kill target. So it's going to, 1, do the volley, and 2, it's going to cast something Oath. I forget exactly what it's called. But if that goes off, it's going to MC a member of your group. So, you want to take care of that. The other two aren't super important. They will cast Shadow Rejuvenation. That one, you don't really have to worry about. It's, when it finishes, it starts a channel that heals anything around it, and at that point you can Leg Sweep, Ring of Peace, or do a regular interrupt, and they're taken care of. But the main thing here is to kill Skull. This is not a bad pack to pull the Shrouded Affix in. That's right next to us, right at the top right of my screen. I, for whatever reason, didn't pull it this time, but normally I would. But again, just make sure that you're taking care of Skull. This is like one of the more deadly packs that exists in this pool here. But it also gives quite a good amount of percent for the group, so it's pretty nice too. Okay, the next pool is going to be the guy that's guarding. There I go. I grabbed the Infiltrator. It's actually a safer pack here to do. All these guests and the guy that is marked there, the Spectral Guest, or sorry, Spectral Valet. This cast, if it goes off, it does damage, and it reduces the damage that you and the rest of your group do by 20%, and that stacks. So it's super important to kick that. It's like a 15-second recast, so you just need one melee on it, and you're good. Now, the nice thing about doing like these pulls that I'm doing here is it's giving time for Lust to come back up because we're going to want Lust for Maiden, right? You're going to want Lust for that first shield on Maiden, so pulling these and clearing the area is just going to giving us some room to deal with the next set of trash that we're going to be pulling. Okay, so over here I'm going to set my Transcendence, and I'm going to tell my group to stay here. That's because this next area has like a bunch of rugs, and all the effects go underneath the rugs, and it's kind of deadly. So I just run in here. I spinning crane kick, I shield myself with Cell Brew, pull a bunch of these up to the Infiltrator, and then I just transcend through the wall back to here. And this is going to give us more room to deal with all these adds and just make it a little bit easier. There is a rug here, but generally the effects, you can position yourself to where you're not near the rug and you don't really have to deal with them. There are 3 things to interrupt in here and things to take care of. So purple, the one that's marked with purple, is kind of the one that I generally take as the tank. This one casts Banshee Wail, and it does quite a bit of damage if it goes off. Also, this mob specifically is applying a debuff to the group, anyone that's in melee. It stacks all the way up to 100. If it reaches 100, everyone gets MC'd that has that up to 100. So it's something that can be dispelled, but a lot of healers don't realize that it's something that needs dispelled. It is a magic ability, so it has to be a healer that dispels it. So if you see that you or your other melee are getting kind of high, you might want to tell them, hey, make sure to dispel at like 25 stacks, or if they can't see it, you can tell them to dispel whenever. Now, I'm going to come over here and just kind of pull this because, again, I see we've got a little bit of time left on Lust. So, again, we've got the Spectral Valets on both purple and triangle here. So, again, we are going to want to make sure that we're kicking these. I told my group, get the kick on triangle, I'll get the ones on diamond, and then there's also the Infiltrator here. Now, I pull this back into the area that we've already opened up, just so that we don't get that Usher. If you pull the Usher there, it's not too bad, but this group does do quite a bit of damage to tanks, and you do need to get those interrupts off. So generally, I just try not to pull it, just because it's a little bit safer. Now, once this pack is taken care of, we've cleared our path so that as soon as we leave main, we can just jump over that railing and go straight down to Moroes. Once these 2 are dead, we're going to all go into the hallway with Maiden. And we're going to pull some stuff. Now, to be careful, there are 2 paths that kind of go from room to room. So sometimes they'll be coming, sometimes they won't. I pull right there on the edge there. There's 2 Infiltrators. I pull those out, and I pull the other 4 remaining mobs. And then I just kind of turn my camera to see if there are the paths coming or not. I have my nameplates so that they show anywhere up to 80 yards away. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to see if the pat is coming or not out of those doors. The small mobs in here, they're not important. They don't do a lot of damage. You can see the pat is about to come out the door that I had pulled from before, so I'm going to grab it. These ones are important. We want to make sure that we're getting interrupts on both Star and Diamond. Diamond is, again, the mob that's putting that debuff on everything. It will cast Banshee Wail. And then the Maiden, I'm going to be honest, the one marked with Star, I don't know what it does. But I know it needs kicked when it starts to do its cast. Again, these won't always be right where they were. Sometimes they'll be in the first door, sometimes they'll be in the second door. Sometimes they'll be so far back that you won't even get them. It's kind of about timing and the randomness that comes through on this. So, ideally, if they're coming out when you're about to go to Maiden, pull them with the rest of the group so you can just nuke them down. And if they're not there and you're coming out of Maiden, just be ready to CC, knock them away with a ring. Because at that point, then you just will avoid them so that you don't have to deal with 2 adds by themselves. Alright, so Maiden. This is a boss that is generally the first make or break for the dungeon. Because the shields are just so important. So, what I do here is hopefully I normally take care of the first interrupt. Unfortunately, everyone got the first interrupt, so that's awkward. Luckily, we have a shaman in here so they can get the next one because it's like a 13-second cast, which is just long enough to not, or like a cooldown between the casts. It's just long enough for you not to get them again, but for a shaman, it is short enough. And then when it comes to shield time, generally I tell the group we're going to lust on the first shield and then save your pots because we'll use pots on the second shield. That's generally the safest way I found to handle it. Some people will pop their cooldowns right on pool instead of saving it for the shield, so that generally gives it to where, hey, those cooldowns are hopefully back up for the second shield. Now, there is something you can do here. You see, I went into the Holy Ground to get that debuff to take off her penance. Technically, if you stand right on top of her and taunt, she will punch you right when her penance comes out. But I've had like a third of the time, maybe a fourth of the time, where she doesn't. And then you're just stuck in repentance until it falls off, and that's super awkward. So, honestly, I just grab it just to be safe. It's a little bit more, healing for the healer to do, but as a monk, you can sell brew once it's up. You can use Shield of Aegis if you're using that, or a couple other things to just, you know, negate that damage on yourself. Now, a lot of times when we get to the second shield, it will work out nicely to where Touch of Death is up. Unfortunately, it's a high enough key now that it's not going to be up, so you can see I definitely did use my pots. I've activated the Zao, and I'm just trying to burst this down as much as possible with the rest of the group. If everything goes well, you'll be able to interrupt. If it looks like it's about to fail, you can sell brew and Zen Med, and you will survive the explosion. And hopefully, like a rogue cloaks or a hunter, if you've got them turtles, you can survive that way. But generally, that's more of like a last-ditch effort if you end up getting a third shield. But if you do get a third shield, just know you can survive doing that, and generally you can kill the boss from like 5%. So if that comes to that, you've got that as an option. Luckily, we were able to kill it before the third one came out. It was in Touch of Death range for the Touch of Death to kill it. So, did that, and now we're going to move down to the Moroes room. Now, again, we've cleared all this trash here, so we're good. Just want to make sure that before we jump down, we wait for the healer to be there. The first thing I'm going to target is this Arcane Warden. It's kind of like the mob that does the damage, right? And then I run in, grab this. Normally the other pack's going to pull, so I will go over there in a second. But the important things to know is to move out of the purple circle that you just saw explode. And then these big circles that get targeted on people, these big circles actually deal damage to the ads. You can see that I wasn't kind of prepared because one of the people in my group pulled the other Arcane Warden that I normally like to save till after the boss, but picked it up and we're going to deal with it. Again, those circles, you don't want to have your melee or ranged overlap them on top of other people because then they'll take double damage, but if you can get them on the ads, including the warden themselves, it will deal damage to them, and it does a crap ton of damage. So even if they're standing away, technically there I should have used Ring of Peace to knock them into that explosion that the monk had, because it would have finished off those ads, but that's okay. We'll see the warden deal some damage here in a little bit. Generally, I will wait till these are about dead before I pull the next group. There's another warden over there. There's another infiltrated mob, but again, because the guests don't throw dynamite anymore, this is actually kind of a safer pull now. Maybe not something I would do if it was different affixes, but with Fortified bursting, it's not too bad. Alright, so you can see I'm going to pull both groups here. I'm going to grab the warden. And then there is a waiter that goes back and forth between the boss and the room that's on my back right now. So ideally it's there when you need to pull it. Unfortunately for us, it wasn't there when I started pulling these. So that's a little unfortunate. I wasn't feeling super confident, so I waited to pull in the Arcane Warden. It's probably a bad idea, especially since the Arcane Warden has the most health, but it is what it is. And then you want to pick up the traps and be ready to CC. So you can see I'm marking things here. Lord Crispin is the one that I recommend always killing first. And then there's Druger, who I recommend always keeping CC'd until the very last moment, who's on the far right. He does the whirlwind, where he'll jump out at someone and start whirlwinding. Don't ever kill him. Just literally let him do his own thing, taunt him right, and then just tell your range to be ready to move away. But generally we'll pull Crispin first. He's the one that does like the frontal. That's like a huge frontal, right? You can stop that frontal with Ring of Peace. I'm sure if you roll away and then clash them, you can probably stop them that way too. But I do like to save clash because there's a caster in this group. The groups kind of change, right? But you always want to kill Crispin first, save Druger for last, and then Darius is kind of a deadly one to deal with. So either do him second or third, and then the caster, it's kind of like whenever you want to take care of it. I'm here to decide that we're going to do it second. Generally, I actually do it third. That way you can just kind of pull it without worrying about breaking the other CCs. But this time I decided to do it a different way. So, throw your traps, and then I use para on whatever the second target's going to be. So here you can see I'm going to paralyze the Baroness. And once the other guy's trapped, you just pull down Crispin. Don't actually attack, just pull with taunt, and then wait till it gets down, and then hit with Cake Smash. Remember, the important thing here is you want to kill the new ads coming in, not Moroes, because if he gets to 60%, all the CC breaks. So you want to just focus on these ads. You can see that we did use a Ring of Peace there to stop the cast. That was the other monk. Considering whether I want to use mine or not, everyone moved out, so I'm going to save it so I can knock this caster out right here. Bing! And then I can just hit it with a move and then clash it out, and now it's not going to break the other CCs, which is pretty nice to have. If you don't have Clash or Ring available there, a Hunter is good there because they can just hit it once and then interrupt it, but they do have to be, like, there is kind of a weird line of sight going on. And you can move on. Now, the reason I actually generally like to do this chick third is because she's also not super deadly. You can just target the boss and cleave off onto her and just make sure that you're doing, like, focus kicks. Druger is pretty dangerous, though. Okay? Or Darius, sorry. Darius throws an axe at a range, so you want to make sure your range aren't stacked up. You can see where it's going to land. You've got like 1 second before it lands. He's going to pick it, put an orange circle underneath the person, and then he's going to throw it. So just be careful with that. It's not something that's dangerous for us, right, as melee, but for the rest of your group, it can be something that'll kill your healer or your ranged real quick. Alright, so you can see I'm not even worried about Druger. I'm just going to let him do his thing. I'm going to let the boss break him at 60%. I'll get a taunt on him. And then generally, I just like to throw a Ring of Peace. Now, these guys are immune to like regular CCs, so like, you know, paralyze, traps, stuff like that. However, knockbacks still work on them. So if I see that it jumps towards a range and the range isn't paying enough attention, it's just standing in that whirlwind, I'll just throw a Ring of Peace and move him away. You don't actually have to kill this guy. Now, my Warlock's like, I want to kill him. I'm scared. If they want to do that, that's fine. If you have your range and they feel more comfortable killing them, that's fine. But melee should definitely never try to go on them. They will kill themselves. So if you have a lot of melee, just stay on Moroes. Again, you don't actually have to kill Druger. The boss event ends as soon as Moroes dies. But from here, it's just kind of taking care of things. I do throw out Vivifies every once in a while, especially if the healer has the bleed and like 2 other range that take more damage. If it goes on me, since I'm a dwarf, I will Stone Form it off. You can also use File if you're Kyrian to File it off. But generally, it's more like the healer issue, right? So just watch everyone's health and be ready to hit them with Vivifies, because if they die, that means, you know, more people are going to die. Now, you can see I just told my healer, drink, and everyone else needs to LOS because I'm going to pull another pack here. Normally I would have pulled the Warden with it, but obviously the Warden got pulled earlier. Pulling this other pack here, and that pat, and we're just going to take care of it LOS.
Aggro.
Now, you can see on my note on the left, that's kind of like a note I made for myself, just to kind of remind me what each of those bosses does. And, you can see at the bottom, we need 72% in order to move on. Now, after this group, we were going to be safe. I wanted to pull this Infiltrator just for a couple more stats, plus it pats. Unfortunately, when I pulled it, it pulled the other group, and this is the group that has that, the 2 guys that do the Shadow Mend, right? And the one that has the super dangerous, it's going to CC people or fear people with the volley. So you can see the volley just went off, and it feared those other people. Somehow I managed to dodge it. But it's something you want to take care of them. I haven't set to be marked with Moon, but it's the Spectral Retrainer. Again, you just want to worry about interrupting those 2 casts. The other 2 guys aren't as important. The reason that this guy's so important, as well, you can see, he's not affected by any CC. You can see I Ring of Peaced those 2 other mobs that were doing the heal. He didn't move, he just stood there. Same thing with Paralyze, same thing with Leg Sweep. He's not affected by it. He needs real interrupts. The other 2, you can let their interrupts go off. Don't worry about it. Just if they start casting the Shadow Rejuvenation, which is like a small circle around them, you can either clash them, Ring of Peace them, Leg Sweep them, have someone else interrupt them. They're not the deadly mob. But because of that, we have just over 72%, so we're good on percent now, and we can just go ahead and move down to our final area with Huntsman. So, these Spectral Chargers are dangerous. These are probably going to cause some deaths in your group, especially if the group's not prepared to deal with them. So, they do a cast, and if the cast goes off, it does massive AoE damage to the entire group. The cast happens like every 20 seconds. And then it also does a charge. It picks you, and it's like a frontal. So, what I try to do is I try to pull them into this back corner for this first group. and then I just kind of like, I just sidestep whenever the charges come. Besides that, the cast that these do, you can interrupt them any way you want. Regular interrupts, paralyze, leg sweep, ring of peace, clash, any other people's interrupts. But it's important to interrupt as many as you can. If one goes off, it's no big deal, but if you have two go off in quick succession, it will wipe the group. So, now that those are done, you can pull the next two packs on the right together. The main thing here is just to make sure that the range spread out. That fire circle, if they hit each other with it, someone who doesn't have it, it will spread to them, kind of like Hakar back in the other side. But everything else isn't super deadly to you, right, as the tank. So you can just kind of tank this. Just be careful because the Vanguard's in there. Be ready to use defensives if you feel like you're taking more damage. But other than that, just kind of make sure to move out of the fire circles if they're near you. It generally prefers not to pick melee, but if you only have one ranged, or like a healer that's ranged, and no other ranged, it will pick people in melee, so just be ready to move. You can see I keep on adjusting there. Now, the next pack, there's like 2 horse, there's a stableman, and then 2 other horse. So what I generally do is I will CC one of the horses from the second pack, and then pull in the stable and the single horse with these other 2. I found that dealing with 3 horses at a time is easier than 4. 4 you think wouldn't be too bad, but for whatever reason, it just, you know, that seems to be the magic number, especially with like a warlock in the group, or if you've got 2 range, it makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with 3 than 4. If you feel like your group is coordinated enough to take care of 4 at the same time, then that's fine. I just prefer 3 because I can trust one person in my group to get one of them, and then I can get the other 2 between, you know, regular interrupts, leg sweep, whatever. Now, the stable master casts heal, and it will heal for a bunch. The thing that's important about him is that his interrupt needs to be a real interrupt. It can't actually be like a CC. If you CC it in any way, it'll just recast right after. The chargers, again, they won't recast, but the stable hand will. So just be ready to hit the stable hand with a real interrupt. I generally tell my like ranged, hey, take care of this one, and us melee will take care of the other. Unfortunately, the healer went down and was hoping that I was going to res him, but I had paralyzed this, so we were technically in combat, which is unfortunate. But dealing with one of these by ourselves as the healer runs back isn't bad. The nice thing is if you die, when you come back through the way that we came the first time, you can just jump over the very first railing, and it takes you right to where we're at. So it's really easy. So as soon as I see that he's close, I just pull the other 2, making sure that I'm ready to get the kicks and interrupts on him. And again, I'm facing these charges towards this wall and corner and making sure that's not going towards my range. I found that it's really easy to just not be paying attention to where you're standing. The charge goes off, you dodge it, but the range don't know it's coming. Like, you know, ideally they move, but a lot of times, sometimes it's hard to see. The animation isn't super great here, so play it safe, point them towards the wall, and you'll be good. Now, you can do the next 2 packs together if you want, but again, that will have 4 horses in it. So I just did this one separate. It has 2 horses, it's got a stable hand, and it's got one of those guys that puts the fire circle. You can see it at the very top left hand in the corner. So it is kind of safer if you've got the time to pull this separate. We have the time, I pull it separate. So again, making sure that I'm using a real kick on the stable hand, and then just using any type of CC on the horses marked with star and diamond. Alright, once things are looking settled, I've only got 1 horse left. I told you earlier, you're perfectly fine to deal with 3 horses at the same time, so I went ahead and pulled the other group. So again, this one has a Vanguard in here. It's also got some other mobs. It looks like we've got one that puts the Burning Circle in there. And we do have the Stable Hand, so just watch out for those and deal with this pack just like the others. I generally like to pull this into this group just so you don't have a chance of pulling the boss. That's why I pull it back into the room. And again, just kind of thinking ahead, planning on someone to do something stupid. We don't want them to pull the boss, so point them this way you don't have to worry about the boss pulling and you guys wiping and then failing the key just because it happened to go into a wrong spot. Alright, so gives a little bit of time for the healer to drink if they need mana, until you're ranged and melee, you are going to take care of the shared suffering by yourself. It's Fortified week, you can comfortably take care of yourself on a 23 or lower. Tyrannical, that might be a little bit different, maybe 21 or lower, but here's what you can do. So, take care of this guy, we just start attacking him, right? He doesn't really do anything besides stomp in phase 1, they got rid of the ghost thing, so you don't have to worry about that. At 50%, the guy will jump off, and then you have to make sure you're pointing him away from the melee. He does that frontal with Mortal Strike. It is a frontal, so melee like to run in front, kill themselves, just try to aim it away from him. And then the shared suffering is that purple circle he's going to do around him. So, the first one, I like to take care of myself with just Zen Med. So you can Zen Med the first one, just pop it, stand there. It won't break until it hits you, because it doesn't break until a melee hits you. So, Zen Med has been used, and you have soloed the first shared suffering. Now, I'm using the more defensive build with my Kyrian Soulbind. Now, real quick, I'm going to stop talking about that and talk about what happened right there. When he remounts the horse, for some reason, threat gets really weird. You can try taunting and nothing happens. That rogue died because like some weird threat bug. So just be ready, try to like stay near it and just keep on hitting it, and as soon as like he stops moving, taunt. Otherwise your rogue's gonna die, or one of your melee. In this case, it's my rogue. Alright, so going back to the shared suffering, I'm playing the defensive option at the beginning of the Soulbind for Mykonos, so I've got where Fortifying Brew gives me a shield when I use it, instead of also increasing my health and my stagger. So you can also, if you're running that, you can just use Fort Brew to immune one of the shared suffering. And by immune, I just mean Soul Soak. It's not actually immune. So here, I've actually Cell Brewed with Fort Brew, just to be safe. If you aren't using the defensive option, like I am, you will want to Cell Brew when you Fort Brew, just to make sure that you survive. And then if you have a defensive trinket, I've got the one, the Aegis. I've done it before where like I've just let my healer know I'm going to need something for this one, and I just like Cell Brew, use that trinket, and whatever they've got for me, whether it's like a bark skin, maybe a defensive totem, or a priest can put Guardian Spirit on you. All those things work. Or you can just tell your melee to come in and soak one with you. Ideally, someone who's got an immunity. A rogue with Cloak of Shadows will work. A hunter with turtle will work just fine. All those things. So, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any comments or things you think I could have improved on, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. See y'all!